What's up, guys? So I had to I think I talked about it in the last video, but I had to repair this firewall before the engine could go in for good. Obviously, you can't get to any of this with the engine in place. So this is a common problem on these trucks, especially in up in the Midwest where they're dumping salt on the roads all winter. So there's basically a pinch seam, a weld seam that goes all the way across the firewall. It looks just like this seam, and it carries all the way across. So this piece kind of rolls inward, and goes up to the windshield frame there, and then this piece just comes down, and then they pinch weld the seam. So that seam is kind of like the bottom of a gutter up here. You can't see very well, but this is your cowl. So this is where the HVAC system, the blower, gets its air from over there on the other side. But water has to be able to basically pass through there, and so it starts in the center and kind of travels down here, and then ultimately gets dumped out kind of right there. There's like a little opening for the water to run out. So what happens is GM used this caulk, this garbage sealant. It's not very good stuff, and they just go up in this in the cowl and caulk that entire seam. So over time the caulk fails because it's not very good, and the way that they originally do these cabs is they weld the cabs first, and then they caulk them, and then they spray them. So when the caulk fails, the water starts getting into the seam. The seam is bare steel because it was not painted first. If they'd have welded and then painted and then caulked, like these cabs would probably last for 100 years. But so it ultimately just eats that entire seam, and a lot of times you can't really, it doesn't look that bad. This didn't look terrible. You had the rust in the center that you could see, but by the time you start getting into it, it's a lot worse than it looked. So in order to repair this, you got 2 layers of steel you got to fix now. The inner, this piece, and behind there is, that height of the weld seam is rotted out and gone, and then the front piece is also rusted. So I had to cut all the way into the cab, and then repair the inner piece first, and then put these outer pieces over top of them. So there's just one little hole there. This piece, basically what happened is this bracket for the booster, again, GM puts this caulk all the way around the outside of that, and it completely failed. So it just rusted in between the bracket and the firewall. So this thing is all pinch welded on. It's kind of hard to see, but there's multiple pinch welds going on all the way around here. And I guess the proper way would have been completely remove all the pinch welds and take this entire bracket off, but there was no rust down here around the seam and everything on this bottom section. So I just cut it right here and cut this top section off, and then did the repair in behind there and got the outer piece welded back on, and then put the top of the bracket back on and re-welded it back on. And there's just a couple of pinch welds that were up here, so I just drilled holes and then plug welded up top. This in here is the same thing. The whole, you can't see, but there's 2 layers of steel in there. This piece, the inner part, wasn't quite as bad. It had a few holes that had to be fixed, but it was more salvageable than the rest of this firewall. So this is a freaking nightmare. This is not fun to fix. You know, I've had quite a few of these trucks, and I try to just, I try not to even buy them if they have this kind of rust going on, because I just always envisioned this to be a freaking nightmare to repair, and it was just as bad as I anticipated. But you know, it's a crew cab, so it was kind of worth the effort. You know, like, these things they're getting harder and harder to come by, and they're getting more and more desirable as time goes on too. So they're just getting really expensive. If you find one of these things that doesn't have this kind of rust on it, it ain't gonna be cheap, even if it's, you know, a bare bones 2-wheel drive. So now I have some industrial epoxy, so I'm going to cover the entire outside of the firewall here, and then get up in here and the entire top of that seam, and paint first, epoxy down into the seam, and then seal it after. And I got some like 3M 5200 that I got for sealer. This stuff is really, really good stuff. It's kind of expensive, but so the nice thing about this is, like, when you're welding on panels, say like rocker panels or something, just the act of welding them on, the welds, it really changes the metallurgy, and it puts a whole bunch of contaminants into the steel, and it just kind of breeds more rust. And when you do a rocker panel or something like that, you really can't do much with the inside of the rocker a lot of the time, the old rocker that you're cutting out. So you have to come back through and get the thing rust proofed. Really is really the only good solution for like an enclosed cavity like a rocker. You got to have somebody go in and spray some kind of rust proofing material in there, because all the welds that the backside of all your welds are it's just gonna take right off and just explode with rust again. So that is the nice thing about this repair, is I can get to the front and the back side of all of these panels. You know, I can get up in here and get to the back side of about half of it, and then inside the cab here, I got most of the entire interior all gutted out of it. I had to, you know, you got to clean everything off of the firewall in order to fix it. So yeah, you can kind of see the back side, the inside of this. So I can come in, you know, and it's kind of ugly on the inside, obviously, the repair, but it won't matter when you get that epoxy on there. It'll be good. It'll be good for the rest of my life anyway. So I've been working at getting this caulk that they put on, the same caulk that they did on the inside of this seam here. I've just been chiseling my way across. I'm almost got that seam all cleaned out. So then I'm going to epoxy the inside of the firewall here, and the outside, and up in the cowl. And then got my 4-inch exhaust system too for this thing, which is really cool. It's for a first gen Dodge. Apparently it fits this conversion extremely well. So after the epoxy is on, the whole outside and inside of the firewall is going to get covered with this sound deadening stuff. So it's kind of a heat barrier and sound deadener. So I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm gonna hit the whole thing all the way right to the holes, and after that, I should be able to set the engine in here. I do. So while we have this all open, we were going to, you know, kind of degrease and clean up everything up here in this whole front, the frame and the front axle, basically everything back and down on kind of the inside of the frame rails there for now, and get all of that painted, at least primed, probably primed and painted black, because then I can just put the engine in here and I can have the transmission and transfer case and everything that I'm not going to be able to access with that stuff in here, like, will already be painted, you know, and I can just kind of work, you know, for the different sections of the truck. Like, let's get the drivetrain in here and get it running, but then, you know, then I can move on and do rocker on that side, you know, drop the tank, fix the rocker cab corner on that side, and then move around. Like, I don't want to do what a lot of guys do and just completely tear apart the entire truck. You know, a lot of people do that, and then you end up with this huge pile, and it's just overwhelming. So I want to just, you know, we're gonna pick one step in the process, and then we're gonna complete that. And the absolute top priority, obviously, for me is getting the engine, transmission, and transfer case sitting in here, so I can start doing all the rigging, which, like I was saying, it really isn't much. So yeah, I just figured I'd show you guys this. This was, like I said, it was a doozy, man. It was not a fun repair. It was about 1 billion tack welds. It doesn't look like much, but my God, it's probably the worst part of this whole process. That's how it always frickin' works out up here in Michigan. Like, I'm just getting all excited. I'm gonna do an engine swap, and then, yeah, I end up having to do body panel repairs first. So, oh well, it would have probably, you know, needed to been done. I mean, I guess even if it wasn't rusted, you still would have had to clean everything off, the inside and the outside of the firewall, so you could do the sound deadening like I really want to do. And, like, you know, even if it wasn't rusted, you'd still have to go in there and get all that caulk out of there and reseal it and, you know, epoxy it and everything. So I don't know. I guess having to weld in these panels was just kind of an extra little step I had to do. That took like freaking 3 days. It was freaking brutal, man. But thanks for watching.